Michael, it feels like we're on the cusp of entering this new phase of the war. How are both sides preparing?
Yes, they are preparing for a new phase. I mean, the Russians have actually pulled back a bit. They were pushing all around the border of the area that was contested. That's about 1,000 kilometres. And they were pushing in the north, they were pushing a bit in the south, but they've stopped pushing now, apart from Bakhmut, which is a story all of its own. They've stopped pushing and they're digging in. They're digging in particularly in the south, because that's obviously where they expect some sort of attack to come. And south of Zaporizhia, that area from Zaporizhia down to Crimea, that clearly is where they think the Ukrainians will do something, because the defences in that area, from Zaporizhia to Melitopol, are really thick, really fierce. And it looks as if they might even be preparing to withdraw some troops from around Kherson, from the eastern bank of the Dnieper River, because they don't want those troops to get cut off if the Ukrainians come directly south, and they may want to concentrate them more in an area of a breakthrough. So the Russian behaviour indicates they think the Ukrainians will come southwards, but the Ukrainians will want to surprise them. They'll want to surprise us all. And I suspect we might see some distraction operations. We might see some diversions before we work out exactly how this offensive is going to play out in the coming weeks.
And meanwhile, while the fighting has been happening because of the weather, it's been an opportunity for Ukraine to stock up on weapons. What have both sides got, essentially, before we embark again?
Yes, I mean, I think the Russians are holding back a certain amount of heavy metal, a certain amount of their armour, because they'll need to bring it in at some point when the Ukrainian attack begins. The Ukrainians, we know, have got, according to NATO, they've got 98% of all of the weapons that the NATO allies promised them. And so that really is main battle tanks are really important. So we know that the Ukrainians have got 230 Western main battle tanks. That's a Leopard tank there, which is the one they really want. They've got some Challengers as well, and some other French tanks, the AMX-10s. But that's really important. But also, they've got over 1,500 fighting vehicles, armoured fighting vehicles. So the various armoured vehicles, fighting vehicles, armoured personnel carriers. And these have got to go with the tanks, because the tanks have to operate with other vehicles, with the infantry, with the artillery. It's got to be a combined package to work properly. This is what the Russians aren't very good at doing. The Ukrainians have put together what looks like a Western armoured brigade. And they may have, that figure of 230 tanks is a magic number, because if they've got 200 tanks, they've got enough for 2 armoured brigades if they've got 1,500 armoured vehicles to go with them. The question is, 2 armoured brigades would be very powerful units. Have they organised them well enough? Have they integrated them well enough? Because they're not used to doing this either. So in the limited time available, have they been able to integrate their forces to real effect? Well, we'll find out as and when they start to use them.
Of course, it is all dependent on the weather. When do we think this new phase might begin?
Quite soon. I keep saying that map that hasn't changed for months will start to change when the weather changes. And this is the outlook now, and we'll keep our eye on the weather, because the ground is drying out. The temperature's rising towards 18, 19, 20. This is for the next few days. It's been very wet recently. That's the Ukrainian spring. But spring becomes summer very quickly in Ukraine. When the ground dries out, then I think we'll start to see the beginnings of this, because the Ukrainians can't use their tanks if they're road-bound. That's the way to lose them. They've got to be able to get them on a broad front, across the ground, and actually make a big impact across a fairly wide area. Some of these tanks are 70 tons. You can't drive a 70-ton tank over soft ground. So they have to wait for the weather to change. But the weather is changing, and for all of those who are wondering when this offensive will start, I say keep your eye on the weather forecast.
OK, thanks very much.